That night, a disquieting sensation settled over Trieu Duong even before he was fully awake. In the biting cold wind that seeped through their small home, he distinctly heard a soft sneeze. Reaching instinctively for his daughter, Truc Lam, his fingers met tiny hands that were startlingly icy, the blanket already kicked far away again. A cold realization washed over him. This wasn't merely a one-time occurrence. His daughter was growing, becoming more active, and every night, she was unknowingly pushing away the warmth, leaving herself vulnerable to the encroaching chill. Sitting there in the oppressive dark, cradling her small, frigid hand, he made a quiet, unwavering decision. By morning, he wouldn't just recover her. He would find a permanent way to keep her warm throughout the night, no matter how much she moved. The cold that night didn't just steal in quietly. It arrived with the fierce northern wind, a relentless presence slipping through every minuscule crack in the walls, as if it possessed an insidious knowledge that the house couldn't fully repel it. The air within slowly transformed, growing heavier, sharper, and colder with each passing minute. It wasn't the kind of cold that jolted you awake immediately. It was the insidious kind that lingered, slowly wrapping its frigid tendrils around everything while awareness was dulled by sleep. In the midst of that quiet, deepening chill, baby Truc Lam slept on. She looked utterly peaceful, her small chest rising and falling gently beneath a thin blanket her father had only recently and carefully pulled over her. Yet, Trieu Duong had already observed a subtle but persistent change over the past few days. His daughter was indeed changing. She was growing stronger, more active even in her sleep. Her legs would stretch without warning. Her tiny hands would push against whatever touched her, and her small body would shift and turn as if she were exploring a world beyond the confines of reality. At first he dismissed it, thinking it was nothing more than typical baby movements, a normal developmental phase. But night after night, the same scene replayed. No matter how meticulously he covered her, no matter how tightly he tucked the blanket around her small form, she would inevitably push it away. Sometimes it would slide down slowly, almost imperceptibly. Other times she would kick it off completely with surprising force. And each time it happened, Truc Lam remained soundly asleep, but he, her father, would always wake. This particular night was no different. Trieu Duong lay beside her, not fully asleep, but merely resting in that fragile state of parental alertness. Ever since Truc Lam had entered his life, his own sleep had fundamentally changed. It was lighter now, more easily disturbed, as if some primal part of him was perpetually listening for her. And as if on cue it happened again. A small movement, a soft rustle of fabric, then an unnerving silence. He opened his eyes without hesitation, turning towards her, and saw the blanket had already slipped halfway down her body, leaving her exposed. He didn't think twice. He reached over slowly and carefully, lifting the blanket back up and replacing it over her. His hands moved with a quiet, practiced gentleness, tucking the edges around her as if he were constructing a soft, temporary shield against the relentless cold. He paused for a moment, watching her, still sleeping, still calm, before slowly lying back down himself. But just a few minutes later it happened again. A small, unconscious kick, a slight turn of her body, and once more the blanket was gone. This time Trieu Duong didn't even wait for the full slide. He sat up immediately, pulling the blanket back over her, tucking it tighter than before. His movements were still gentle, but there was a new, heavier quality in his expression now. Something more focused, more deeply concerned. This wasn't merely coincidence anymore. It was an undeniable pattern, and the night was growing progressively colder. Outside, the northern wind continued its relentless press against the house, slipping through the same narrow gaps in the worn walls. Inside, the temperature dropped little by little, quietly enveloping everything in the room. The thin blanket that had once felt sufficient now seemed utterly unreliable, a flimsy defense. Still, Trieu Duong didn't stop. Again and again he covered her. Again and again she pushed it away. It became a silent, weary rhythm between them. Her unconscious, persistent movement and his constant, conscious protection. There were no words spoken, no sounds beyond the mournful wind and her soft, steady breathing. But in that quiet exchange something deeper was unfolding. It was the quiet, unyielding persistence of a father who absolutely refused to let the cold win. Hours passed in this manner. Each time he lay down, he knew deep in his bones it wouldn't last. Each time he closed his eyes, he was ready to open them again. For him, sleep was no longer the priority. Her warmth was everything. Then, at some undefined point in the deep night, something truly shifted. A small, fragile sound sliced through the silence, a soft, delicate sneeze. Trieu Duong froze, his eyes snapping open instantly, sharper this time, more acutely alert than ever before. He turned toward her, his heart tightening painfully as he looked at her small body. The blanket was gone again, lying crumpled beside her. Her arms had curled inward, her legs slightly pulled up, as if her tiny body was instinctively trying to protect itself from the encroaching cold. He moved quickly, faster than before. His hand reached for hers, and the moment he touched her, he stopped. Her skin was cold, not just cool, but cold enough to make his chest seize with alarm. For a brief second he couldn't move. His fingers gently closed around her tiny hand, holding it firmly between his palms, desperately trying to bring warmth back instantly. His expression shifted, the softness in his eyes now mixed with something far heavier. Guilt. He should have known. He had been right there watching, and still she had gotten cold. Without uttering a word, he pulled the blanket back over her again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just about covering her anymore. That was clearly not enough. He tucked it tighter, pressing it gently around her body, trying to seal every bit of warmth inside. Then he lifted her small hand closer to his face, holding it there, letting his own warmth slowly, steadily pass to her. "I won't let you get cold again." His voice was barely a whisper, a rough murmur in the dark, but it carried a quiet, fierce promise. Truc Lam shifted slightly, her breathing softening once more. But Trieu Duong didn't move away. He couldn't. Not anymore. Instead of lying back down, he stayed sitting beside her, one hand resting gently on the cocooned blanket, the other still holding her tiny fingers. His eyes never left her, watching every small movement, listening to every soft breath, making absolutely sure she was okay. The night continued its slow march, the wind didn't stop, and the cold didn't ease. But this time he didn't even attempt to sleep again. Because in that profound moment, something became crystal clear to him. No matter how many times he covered her, no matter how careful he was, the blanket alone would never be enough. And as that undeniable thought settled in his mind, a quiet, resolute decision began to form. Not rushed, not loud, but utterly certain. By the time morning arrived, he wouldn't just fix this problem. He would change it completely. For him, this wasn't just about a blanket anymore. It was about ensuring that no matter how cold the night became, his daughter would always be warm, safe, and protected in his arms. By the time the first faint light of morning slowly crept into the room, Trieu Duong was still wide awake. The small oil lamp had long since burned out, leaving only a faint, diffused gray glow from outside to fill the space. The wind had finally weakened its assault, but the pervasive cold it had brought still lingered stubbornly in the walls, in the floor, in every corner of their humble dwelling. It was the kind of cold that didn't simply vanish with the passing of night. Truc Lam was still sleeping soundly. This time she was wrapped more securely, the blanket tucked carefully around her after countless adjustments throughout the long night. Her face looked peaceful once more, her breathing soft and even, as if nothing untoward had happened, as if she had never felt the cold at all. But Trieu Duong knew. He had felt it in her hands, he had seen it in the way her body had curled defensively, and that was enough. He gently released her fingers, taking care not to wake her, and slowly stood up. His body felt heavy, aching from staying awake the entire night, but his mind was remarkably clear. There was no hesitation in his movements now, no lingering uncertainty. He had already made his decision. Standing there for a moment, he surveyed the small room. The thin blanket, the simple bed, the worn-out walls with their tiny gaps where the wind had slipped through again and again. Everything suddenly felt incomplete, not inherently wrong, but simply not enough for her. "This has to be better," he murmured to himself. He stepped outside into the crisp, cold morning air. The ground was still damp, the air still biting, but the first rays of sunlight were beginning to break through the lingering gloom, bringing with them a quiet sense of hope. He took a deep, fortifying breath, then walked toward the corner of the yard where he kept old materials, things most people would have long since thrown away. Worn cotton blankets, various pieces of fabric, some old rope, simple tools. To others they were mere scraps. To him they were a solution waiting to be built. He picked up one of the thicker, older blankets, running his hand across its surface, testing its weight and texture. It wasn't perfect, but it was considerably warmer than the one Truc Lam had been using. Then he grabbed another, softer piece of fabric, something gentle enough for her delicate skin. He paused for a second, thinking not about how to create something fancy or elaborate, but how to make something that would genuinely work. She keeps kicking the blanket off, he thought, a quiet realization. So then it shouldn't be something she can kick away. That was the moment the idea became fully clear. Not just a blanket, not just layers, but something that could stay with her. Something that could wrap around her completely. A small protective cocoon. He got to work immediately without delay or second-guessing. He spread the thicker blanket out on the ground, carefully measuring with his hands, already envisioning her small body nestled securely inside it. Then he layered the softer fabric on top, creating a surface that would be warm but still exquisitely comfortable against her skin. His movements were focused, precise. Every fold had a purpose, every cut was careful. He wasn't rushing because this wasn't just about finishing something quickly, it was about getting it absolutely right. As he worked, the morning grew brighter, sunlight slowly filling the yard. But the cold still lingered stubbornly in the air. His hands moved steadily, tying, folding, shaping the fabric into something new, something fundamentally different. A sleeping cocoon. It was a small, enclosed wrap designed to gently hold Truc Lam in place. Not tight, not restrictive, but secure enough that even if she moved, even if she kicked, she wouldn't be exposed to the cold again. He tested the opening, adjusted the layers, reinforced the edges so they wouldn't come loose during the night. Then he stopped for a moment, looking at what he had created. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't something one would buy in a store. But it was made with something far more valuable: attention, care, and a quiet, fierce determination to protect. He carried it back inside. The room was warmer now with the sunlight, but he could still feel lingering traces of the night's cold in the corners. He walked over to the bed and knelt down beside Truc Lam, who was just beginning to stir. Her eyes fluttered slightly, her tiny fingers moved slowly. She was starting to wake. "Hey!" His voice was soft again, gentle as always. "I made something for you." She didn't understand the words, but she responded to the warmth and tenderness in his voice. Her eyes opened a little more, looking toward him with calm, trusting gaze. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms, supporting her head, holding her close. For a brief moment, he simply stayed like that, feeling her warmth, making sure she was truly okay. Then slowly, he placed her into the cocoon he had made. His movements were even more careful now than before. He adjusted the fabric around her body, making sure it was snug but entirely comfortable. He left enough space for her to move slightly, but not enough for the cold air to reach her. Then he paused, watching her reaction intently. Truc Lam moved a little, her legs shifted, her hands pushed lightly against the fabric. But this time the blanket didn't fall away. The warmth stayed. She settled, her body relaxed, her breathing slowed again, and within moments she drifted peacefully back to sleep. Trieu Duong didn't move. He stayed there, kneeling beside the bed, watching her, waiting, making sure. Minutes passed, then more, but everything remained the same. She was still warm, still comfortable, still safe. A quiet, profound relief spread across his face. Not a big smile, not a dramatic reaction, just a small, gentle expression that eloquently said everything. This time it worked. He reached out lightly, placing his hand on top of the cocoon, feeling the steady warmth inside it. "No more cold nights," he whispered, not as a wish but as a solemn promise. Outside, the sun had fully risen, the wind had softened its intensity, and the cold, while still present, no longer felt as threatening as it had during the darkest hours of the night. Because inside that small room, something fundamental had changed. It wasn't just the blanket. It wasn't just the walls. It was the unwavering way he chose to protect her. From that day on, the nights were still cold, the wind still came, and the gaps in the walls were still there. But Truc Lam no longer shivered in her sleep. She no longer curled up from the cold. Because every night, she was wrapped in something far more enduring than just fabric. She was wrapped in her father's unyielding care, his devoted attention, and his quiet, unbreakable promise to always be there. And no matter how strong the northern wind became, that warmth, born of a father's love, never left her.